family, welcome back to my channel. So it has been a minute, but today we are going to dive right into a book video, and I'm going to be going over all of the books that I read in the month of May and then the books that I hope to read in the month of June. In case you're new here, what I have started doing, or started right before I took my hiatus, is I started giving a little synopsis but no spoilers on what the book is about, and then I give my review. When I give a review, I don't have any specific rating scale that I go off of. I just go off of how the book made me feel directly after reading it. Now, I will say my ratings are relative to the category that it's in. So for example, a spicy romance that I give a 4.5 or a 5 out of 5, it's not as compelling or as dynamic as, say, a historical fiction that gets a 5-star where you feel like your entire life has been changed. But in a romance in its category, if it gets a 4.5 or a 5, it's because it's giving me butterflies or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so now that we got the housekeeping out of the way, we're going to dive right in. So I read 17, and I'm a liar. I read 18 books in the month of May, and I'm upset because I have started an Instagram. It's called @KateChapters. I'll link it down below, and then I'll put my little thing on the screen here. And I share a recap at the end of the month. And I realized that I forgot to log one of my books into GoodReads, which is what I refer to do my monthly recap. So anyways, I'm going to talk about it in this video, but I cannot get to my review to tell you exactly what I scored it, but I think I remember. But anyways, I read 18 books in the month of May, mostly romance. It's pretty much my favorite genre. There's going to be a time in my life when I'm more, I don't want to say more sophisticated, because you can read whatever the heck you want, you know what I mean? But it's just, that's what I enjoy right now. So that's what I read a lot of. So my first romance was Georgie All Along by Kate Claiborne. I want to say this might have been a book of the month pick of mine, but I could be wrong. So this one basically is this girl named Georgie. She was a personal assistant to a star who decided to leave Hollywood and run off and live in peace in isolation. So she has to go back to her small town and kind of regroup and figure out what she wants to do with her life. When she comes back into town, she stays at her parents' house, and when she shows up at the house, there's a dude in her house that they forgot to tell her they rented the house to. So that book I gave a 4.5 out of 5. The spice factor in there, I've been starting to rate the spice. So in case you don't like spice, you know what you're getting into. I gave it a 1 out of 5. There's a little bit, but not a lot. So this one, I feel like it was so much more than a romance. I felt like it was somehow very simple, the story, but it was also complicated at the same time. It does start off a little slow, so you're not going to get hooked right away, or at least I didn't, and one of my friends said she felt the same way. But once it really once you really sink into it, it really just explodes. The heroine also starts off a little whiny, and that usually drives me nuts, but I think that it was intentional because I think there was a lot of character building in this book. I also loved the small town setting. It was very, to me, I grew up in a small town. I feel like it just depicted real small town vibes with the gossip and the expectations of people that you grew up your whole life knowing. You know what I mean? It got all of that. There was just a lot of layers. There was family layers, there was a couple situation, there was this beautiful friendship that had spanned years and different seasons of life and everything. There's just a lot going on. So that was a really good book. If you're looking for something that's not just a romance, I would say that's a good overall coming of age plus romance. Next was a true romance. This was Rock Bottom Girl by Lucy Score. I love Lucy Score. She's one of my auto reads. This one I gave a 4.2 out of 5, and the spice factor I gave a 2 out of 5. So in this one, it's about this girl named Marley, and she had just lost her boyfriend, her job, and all of her life savings. And so she decides, well, she doesn't really have much of a choice. She has to return to her hometown and move back in with her parents. And her parents set her up with a gig being a girls' soccer coach because she used to play soccer in high school. And they also get her a gig as the school's newest gym teacher. She immediately runs into this guy that she had a crush on in high school, and he is also a coach, I think cross country maybe, and he's also a teacher, so he's trying to help her adapt to her new role. If you like the movie She's the Man with, was it Lindsay Lohan? Not at all, Amanda Bynes. She's the Man meets Never Been Kissed with Drew Barrymore. If you're old enough like me, if you're a dinosaur like me, to know those two movies, if they were to have a baby, it would be this book. That's how I felt. It gave that early 2000s vibe of rom-com, you know? It was really cute. I loved the characters. I felt like I had left a group of friends when I was finished reading it. I just loved it. I loved every character that was in this book. They were just like a misfit situation happening, and it was just, I was there for it. The only thing that bothered me, and this happens a lot to me in books, is sometimes they'll like cast a person who's supposed to be like 38, but they act like they're like 19. That's the only thing that drives me a little crazy. So that bothered me, but otherwise I gave it a 4.25 out of 5 because I enjoyed everything else about it. The next book that I read was called All the Days of Summer by Nancy Thayer. I don't know if this has released yet because I have been requesting early copies of books because of my new Instagram account, where I'll read something prior to the release date. That way I can let you guys know if you need to run out and pre-order or waitlist it with your library if they let you do it ahead of the release date. So that's what I did with this one. So I'm not 100% sure if it's released yet, but this one I gave a 3 out of 5. It's set in Nantucket, and basically it's about this woman she's in her early 50s, or she's about to be 50, I want to say, and she's kind of going through an empty nester situation. Her son is in college, and he has fallen in love with a beautiful girl, and that girl happens to have grown up on Nantucket. And she was expecting her son to take over the family hardware store, but instead he lets her know that he's going to go with his girlfriend on Nantucket and look into running the construction company that her father owns. Well, while that's all happening, she doesn't realize that he wants to go to Nantucket. Her and her husband are about to get a divorce, so she decides to rent a cottage in Nantucket for the entire summer. Well, his new girlfriend, the one that he's moving to Nantucket with, doesn't like the mom and thinks that she's doing it on purpose so she can basically stalk them. This one I gave a 3 out of 5. I just found it incredibly frustrating. One of the characters was obnoxious. Like, I couldn't get past it. There's some times where like I can deal, but it just, I couldn't do it. But I liked the other character so much that like I powered through despite my hatred for one of the characters. I did, however, feel like I had escaped to Nantucket, and the story stuck with me. I thought the story was really, really, really beautiful, and I think it had a lot of potential, but that one character, she just messed me up, bro. She messed me up. Next, I read The Arrangement by Kirsten Modulin. I had mentioned this in my video where I did like my life update and Q&A. Somebody asked for book recommendations, and I brought this one up. This one I give a 5 out of 5. This one is a thriller, and basically it's about Ainsley and Peter, who have a picture-perfect life. They've got beautiful children. They've been together a long time. They have a beautiful home. They both have good careers, but they decide that their marriage has gotten a little stale, and they come up with a creative solution, which is where both of them will each have one night a week where they go and connect with other people. And quickly they realize that bringing other people into your marriage is maybe not the best idea. I was sucked into this story like immediately. This is one of those thrillers you don't want to put down. You dislike the people just enough that you don't care really what happens to them. There's like this, for me, there's this sweet spot in thrillers where I have to like them enough to like not want to put it, like I don't want to have to put it down because I can't stand them, but I don't want to like them so much that I'm cheering for them in a thriller. You know what I'm saying? And oh, that happened here. Also, it was just, if you could predict this one, power to you. You should start writing thrillers, because I didn't see some of these twists and turns coming. I did not see them coming, okay? This next one. I read The Playlist by Morgan Elizabeth, and I feel awful. I don't want to ever bash things because, you know, this is just my personal opinion, and this is not a bash whatsoever, okay? But this book, I gave a 2 out of 5. This is also a romance, and this one for Spice Factor, I gave a 2 out of 5 on the spicy level. So basically, Zoe is the main character, and her best friend Luna discover like a memory box that has a bunch of memories from their childhood in it. And Zoe opens the box and she realizes that her life has not gone the way that she thought it was based on her memory box. It just wasn't for me. The reason being is, the main thing is I felt like the dude was like a massive like mansplainer, and he kept like pointing out all of the girl's faults, like for the way she was, and she wasn't adventurous enough. And it's like, then don't be with her. Let her be who she wants to be. and go be with somebody else. If that's not for you, that's not for you, bro. You know what I mean? So he kept like trying to convince her that she needs to be sporadic in life. And sometimes it can come off like, you know, you're opening yourself to new things. But in this case, it was just like irritating. But then in the next breath, he would be talking about how obsessed he is with her and how he's loved her forever. And it's like, you don't even love her because you're trying to create somebody new. You know what I mean? I couldn't get past it. But a lot of people love that book, so it could have just been me in that moment or just me in general. Okay, the next one is called The Senator's Wife by Liv Constantine, and this one is a thriller. This one, okay, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. So this story follows Sloane, and she just had experienced a very big tragedy. I don't know why it hurt me to say that whole sentence. I couldn't get those words out. She just experienced a tragedy and she lost the love of her life, that her husband she had been married to for several years. During that tragedy, one of their closest friends lost his wife in the tragedy. Her husband and wife were together. Nothing crazy going on, okay? They were cousins. Calm down, okay? But anyways, the cousins were together, so husband and his cousin. Well, 2 years after the tragedy has occurred, the cousin's husband and then the dude's wife end up falling in love and getting married together. Well, Sloane, the main girl, ends up having to have a scheduled surgery, and she's going to have like a 6-week at-home recovery situation, and they realize that she needs some help. So they decide to hire in-home help, and Sloane quickly becomes suspicious of the person that they've hired. Okay? So for this one, again, 4.5 out of 5. The thing with this one is normally if there's multiple points of view, it drives me absolutely bonkers in thrillers because sometimes they toss in a couple extra that are completely irrelevant, just throw you off the scent. And then you're just like reading stuff that at the end of the day was like superfluous and you didn't even have to read it. You know what I mean? So at the end, you're like, what the heck? I didn't need to read that, but you were just trying to throw me off. But in this one, that does not happen, okay? The points of view are just so necessary and so good. And again, the character sweet spot was hit where like I didn't like them enough to root for them, but I liked them enough to stay invested in the story. You know what I mean? It was just really, really good. And then what I loved about it, and this is one of my pet peeves when it comes to authors in a thriller, if you kind of have a complicated situation going on, which this one was because there was multiple points of view, if you like just drop me at the twist at the end and then you don't explain to me what just happened, I get very mad, okay? I get big mad. I need you to breadcrumb it for me real quick. And so that's what this author does. She breadcrumbs it. She tells you how we got there. And it just was like, bam, you know? This was just a very juicy, it wasn't necessarily like heart racing, but I was very invested. So if you need kind of like a lighter read, I feel like this would be a great beach read. Next up, I read Sing You Home by Ava Hunter. Okay, this one's a spicy romance, and I gave this one a 4.25 out of 5 stars, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 for spice factor, okay? So this one was such a good story concept. So a famous country musician and his wife get in a plane crash, and they never find her body. He is just distraught, and he goes into a hermit shell, and he doesn't want to come out of his house. Well, almost a year later, his brother is down in some random town and goes to a diner, and what do you know? He sees his brother's wife. But it turns out she has amnesia and she's married to somebody else now. What? This book, the concept was so good. There was a little bit of suspense, like intertwined into the romance aspect, and there was a main event that was happening, but there was other things that kind of were getting revealed in the story that I loved how it was like blossoming. So you were already invested because of the main thing. You want to know how that happens, but everything leading up to it is also revealed that you don't even realize is going to get revealed. I just thought that was great. The only thing is the reason why it wasn't a 5 out of 5 is because it's very like angsty or whatever, like a little touch frustrating. I think that the author navigates it pretty well. There's some miscommunication happening. So if you're like anti-miscommunication trope, then this might not be for you. I think she does a good job with it, but it does get a touch repetitive. So just a warning. Okay, the next book, you guys, was Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. If you haven't read Sarah Adams and you like joy, please go pick up one of her books. The cool thing with Sarah Adams too is that her books are pretty squeaky clean. So if you're not into like spicy romance, if you find it embarrassing or whatever, her books would be the perfect one to dive into because they're just squeaky clean, butterfly inducing type romance novels. This one I gave a 4.75 out of 5. And I gave in the spice factor a 0.25 out of 5. There's like little tiny mentions, but nothing like, you know, any crazy. Okay, so this story follows Annie Walker, which first of all, her name. Okay, her name. It's just the cutest name. She owns a flower shop because her mom always loved flowers and she wants to carry it on in a small town in Rome. And it's called Rome, Kentucky, I think. Well, she is an introvert and she cannot figure out how to date, but she knows that she wants her happily ever after. So she goes to her soon-to-be sister-in-law, who was in the first book called When in Rome, which if you haven't read it, start there. Okay, that's such a good book. But anyways, she goes to her soon-to-be sister-in-law and she has a Playboy bodyguard. And so she ends up coming up with the idea, the sister-in-law does, that the bodyguard and her become besties and he teaches her how to come out of her shell for dating purposes. And the reason why they think it's going to work is because he's a total playboy. He is anti-commitment. And then she's all about vows and commitments and children. So it should be easy to avoid their feelings, right? No, not in rom-com life. Okay. It was beautiful. It was butterfly inducing. I just was smiling. I loved the love story. I loved how honest the characters were. There wasn't too much miscommunication going on. There's just like a touch of like hidden feelings. But I actually said in my review that the main character, the main female character owning a flower shop was perfect because I felt like the joy you feel looking at a bouquet of flowers is how I felt reading this book. The thing that I love about Sarah Adams is that she does the squeaky clean romances, but somehow the chemistry is like on fire hot. Like, I don't get it. She's not doing the spicy scenes, but somehow she just like lands the chemistry and connection. The only reason I didn't give it a full 5 is because there were a couple conversations in the book that were like borderline awkward, but just most of all, I just freaking loved the book. Next up was Forbidden French by R.S. Gray. This is a spicy romance. Now, I want to tell you, I just recently discovered R.S. Gray, and I'm happy I did because I read The Arrogant Devil by her and Cold Hearted Boss, I want to say, were the first two that I read, and I loved them, especially The Arrogant Devil. That was really good. So if you're looking for a new author to go take a look at, I would say R.S. Gray, and most of her books are available on Kindle Unlimited. If you're wondering what that noise is, it's the cat, okay? If a child is not near me, an animal will be. Okay, so for this one, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, and the spice factor, I gave it a 2 out of 5. So this story follows Lainey. She comes from a very established family in the Boston social scene. She basically runs into this dude that she was obsessed with from her like prep school. Like I was getting, can we not? Excuse me. So I was getting kind of like Gilmore Girl vibes, you know, like that type of prep school. So she runs into this guy and she finds she's still very drawn to him. And now he's drawn to her as well. Well, unfortunately, she's already betrothed to somebody else and he ends up causing some scandal for her. It's a very slow burn. Slow burn. This should have been a very predictable story, but the author does an amazing job. What is she doing, you guys? Just extra free entertainment, okay? The author ends up taking a lot of unexpected turns and it makes the predictability factor a little bit lower. I don't know. I just found it very refreshing. I just loved the characters. I loved the journey they went on. I loved the way they spoke to one another, just the whole thing. And I loved the relationship between the grandmother and the main character. I felt like it really blossomed and I just really loved that. You guys, the next one. Okay, first of all, again, I don't like to dog on a book. So this one is highly recommended by a lot of people, so don't go off of my review. Maybe read the synopsis and decide if you might want to read it for yourself. This one was Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I almost want to own this book just because the cover is so beautiful, but I can't be doing stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? This book follows a woman who she had lost both her husband and her son, and she works at an aquarium, and there's an octopus that lives in the aquarium, and he is approaching the end of his life. And it turns out that he has some connections to reveal to her. It sounds a little crazy, I know, but the actual story was really, really sweet. I enjoyed the story. The story itself was really sweet. I'm sorry, I'm like midst laughter because of the cat. My life is so crazy. However, I felt like the story could have been told in like 50 to 100 pages. This was a 400-page book, but that I could have gotten away with. I could have understood because there's a lot of people that are into like the very descriptive, immersive type books. That's just not for me. So it's like I probably would have just like taken that into account, that we're just not vibing. But my issue with this one is like one of the main characters in this book, he's supposed to be in his 30s and he's the whiniest, like unappreciative jerk face, you know? And so that really, I couldn't get past that. So I gave that one, I don't know if I said that. I gave it a 3 out of 5, but honestly, I feel like that's kind of generous. The next one that I read was a novella, and it was called Tempting Heat by Sarah Whitney. And this one I gave it a 4 out of 5, and the spice factor, I gave it a 1 out of 5. So this was a novella, so it was like super short and sweet, but basically Finn gets snowed in at her apartment. Well, it turns out that her roommate had a dude over platonically, and he wakes up in the apartment. Well, it turns out they're enemies from the past. They were like friends turned enemies from the past. So she has to like face her past. I felt like it was perfect. It was to the point. It was short. It was sweet. The spicy scenes were good. There was some cheesy moments. Just overall though, if you're looking for something, like especially during wintertime or something, if you just want like something short and sweet, maybe to break up a thriller or something, that would be cute. The next one that I read, I'm not even going to spend a lot of time on this, but this was Bridesmaid Lotto by Rachel Astor. I just don't want to come across negative, but this was a 2 out of 5 for me. It was basically a story about this girl who wins this lottery to be a bridesmaid in this important person's wedding. One of the groomsmen is a very famous actor, and the girl that wins this lottery is actually like in love with him and has been since forever. And when I say in love, I mean like the celebrity type of in love. It wasn't for me. It just was very juvenile. Next up, I went with another R.S. Gray. This was Blushing in the Big Leagues. And this was one that I got to read ahead of the release, but it has been released since. And I believe it's available on Kindle Unlimited. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5. And Spice, I gave a 2 out of 5. This follows Tate, and she has one rule. She does not date baseball players. But her friends convince her to go out to this fancy penthouse suite party that's happening, and they triple dog dare her to go and hook up with a guy and have a one-night stand. She cannot say no to a triple dog dare, but she also doesn't want to hook up with a guy. So she finds this really hot guy and then convinces him to pretend like they hooked up. Well, it turns out that guy is a baseball player, and he's also on her brother's team, and their attraction to one another is not avoidable, and they keep running into each other. The one thing that I love about R.S. Gray's books that I've read so far is that, and I think this is now my second, okay, so I'm obviously an expert, is that I feel like she puts the sports in the background. I feel like other sports romances, it's usually like the guy is forefront and his baseball career or football career or whatever it is the most important part. With R.S. Gray, I feel like she puts that in the background and more focuses on the female and the female's career. So Tate is I want to say either a pediatric nurse or like a NICU nurse or something like that. And I felt like she was more the highlighted. The relationship to me, I didn't ever get their connection because the guy was very immature. And so some of the stuff he was doing was it just wasn't for me in some situations. So it just wasn't a total favorite, but it was also, like, I didn't regret reading it or anything like that. The next one was really cute. This one was called For Love or Honey, and this was by Stacey Hart. So this one I gave a 3.75 out of 5, and the spice was a 2 out of 5. This one is a city slicker rolling into a Texas town, and he's supposed to try and convince the town to sell rights to their land, but instead, he comes across the Blum sisters, and they're determined to make sure that he's run right back out of town. So if that doesn't sound like a Hallmark synopsis, and that's basically what this one was. One of those predictable light reads, predictable in a good way. When I say predictable, I don't mean that as an insult. I honestly was sitting there like towards the beginning of this book. I was like, how are more people not talking about this book? Because I felt like the author did just such a beautiful job with the writing. But then I felt like it just kind of like weakened off towards the end. So it was like stronger in the beginning, whereas most books I feel like are the other way. So anyways, that was a cute read, and I want to say it was free on Kindle Unlimited. The other book that I read that I cannot find my review for was No Funny Business by Talia Hunter. And the same thing with this one, stronger in the beginning and then tapered off at the end. Basically, it was a story about a girl who is running her father's cafe. He has a health issue. Her ex-boyfriend happens to be a celebrity chef, and he's in town, and he comes in to save the day. That one, I want to say I gave like a 3.5 or maybe a 3.75 out of 5 as well, just like that other one. I don't remember the spice factor, but it was cute. It was really good. I liked the writing was stronger at the beginning and tapered off towards the end. Next one I read was Baby Moon or Bust by Ava Hunter. I got to read this one ahead of the release as well, but I think that it got released like today, actually. This one I gave a 4.25 out of 5, and spice factor was a 2 out of 5. So this one follows Tess, and she's a talented rising star in the interior design industry. She has developed a reputation for being kind of a tyrant in her position. Well, she's determined to shed that side of her on one night of fun. So she goes to a random bar, meets a random guy, and has a one-night stand. Well, she ends up pregnant, okay? And no way to find the guy because they didn't use any names, and she doesn't know any details about him because that was their rule. So here's the thing. Pregnancy tropes are really not my favorite because I always just kind of find the whole one-night stand situation just a little awkward. Like, and I don't mean that, I hope that doesn't come across judgmental because it's not at all. It's just not my favorite thing to read. But I felt like the way the author handles this one was just so unique, so refreshing. I loved the way the situation reveals itself. I love the way the guy finds out. I felt like it was different than the ways they've done in the past. There's definitely supremely cheesy moments, but it was just very romantic, very charming. And I don't know, I just felt like I was feeling all the emotions. And it could be because of the pregnancy. You know, like I just had 2 pregnancies back to back last year, so maybe that's what it was. The next book that I need to talk about, this is serious, you guys. Okay, let's everybody just take a deep breath. This one was The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren. I actually have it right here. I have it right here. This was a 5 out of 5. This was a 100 out of 5. The spice factor was only a 1, which is shocking because Christina Lauren is usually on the spicier side. If I could get you to read any book and you need a romance in your life, this is the book that I want you to go read. So this follows Fizzy. This is actually the second in a series. It started out as The Soulmate Equation, which I loved and I read last year. And it was the Soulmate Equation was apparently only supposed to be 1 book, but people loved Fizzy so much in the first one that they got the authors to write her own book. So Fizzy is a best-selling romance novelist, and she realizes that in her own life, she's never experienced the love that she writes about. Thankfully, this grouchy producer approaches her and tries to convince her to film a reality dating show. She knee-jerk reacts and says no, but then the more she thinks about it, she realizes that the ball is in her court because they want her on the show so she can turn it into what she wants to turn it into. So she comes up with a reality show that is like no other, teams up with the producer, and they have to make it work because they have each a lot riding on it. What I loved about this book was I felt like it was so unfiltered. And I felt like the way that you're in the main character's Fizzy's head and the way that her growth happens, you're along for the ride as if you are Fizzy yourself and you are growing. I don't know how it was done. I was in a reading slump. I had started like 5 or 6 books and then stopped them because I just wasn't vibing with anything, and this pulled me out. By page 3, I was like, I'm done with my slump. This is gonna be the one. By like the 90% mark in a book, generally everything's wrapping up, right? Everything's wrapping up. We know what's happened. We saw the character development. And this book, I'm sobbing. I was sobbing. Joy was just pouring out of my eyelids. Go read the book. That's all I have to say. There's nothing else that needs to be said about it, okay? That's it. Last book that I read was Bound by Honor by Cora Riley. Here's the thing. I was supposed to read Happy Place by Emily Henry, but if I was like, if I read Happy Place and slightly not as good as The True Love Experiment, then I'm going to be rating poor Emily Henry, and she's like one of my favorites. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I know that's going to be amazing, but I needed a separation. So I decided to read like a mafia romance. So this one, Bound by Honor, is a mafia romance. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, and the spice factor was 3 out of 5. The spice factor is a little bit higher on this one. So if you're not into spicy romances, this would not be for you. But basically, Aria, she's 15 years old, and she's being described as the most beautiful woman in Chicago. So naturally, her father promises her to a New York mafia family. At the age of 18, she's sent off to go live with the heir to the mafia throne in New York because the families are trying to align, okay? I need you to know that there are books that have like gray morality zones. This book has no morality in it, okay? So if you need morality in a book, don't go to this one. It was so entertaining and so ridiculous. I didn't want to put it down, but also it was ridiculous. There's a lot of frustrating parts. The girl was killing me, but I just had to keep reminding myself that she was 18. So there's just a lot of immaturity. The husband's kind of a jerk face sometimes. Some of the stuff that happens is just frustrating. But just know that it's entertainment. So I loved the pacing on it. There was a little bit of suspense that gets sprinkled in towards the end. And so it's like hooked me enough that I am now invested. Okay, so that's everything that I read in the month of May. I'm going to quickly go through, because I hear my children screaming and my poor husband. I'm going to quickly go through the ones that I want to read in the month of June, and then I'm going to release you to the rest of your life, okay? To the rest of your day, I should say, not to the rest of your life. Hopefully you'll come back. Make sure to subscribe before you leave. You like how I did that? That was real smooth. The first thing that I want to read is Juniper Hill by Devney Perry. I read Indigo Ridge, I think it's called, earlier this year, and it was so good. If you need kind of a suspense romance type situation, that would be one I recommend. Allie Hazelwood's newest, Love Theoretically, is going to be releasing this month, so I want to read that. I have started an advanced reader copy of the book When Pigs Fly by Chrissy Lanier. I want to read The Last Eligible Billionaire by Pippa Grant. I love Pippa Grant's books. I discovered her this year as well. Next is Royally in Trouble by Megan Quinn. If you don't already know, I'm obsessed with Megan Quinn. So anytime she has a book release, I'm already there for it. Reckless by Elsie Silver. I'm so excited about that one. Housemaid's Secret by Frida McFadden. Unorthodox Love by Heidi Shertock. Loreth Ann White, The Maid's Diary. Tessa Bailey's Unfortunately Yours is coming out this month, and I had pre-ordered it. It's the second in the series to Secretly Yours, and I did not like Secretly Yours. But I liked the premise on this one, so I'm going to give it a try. I want to read All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony, I think it's Doerr, something like that. But I don't know. I think it's a heavier, like, historical fiction. We'll see if I can, if my brain can handle. Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld, something like that. I heard that was good, and I got it in one of my Book of the Month boxes. If you don't know what Book of the Month is, you basically get a book every single month, but you get to pick between 6 titles, or you can skip that month. Or sometimes you can even pick like one of the member favorites to get instead. Ship it directly to your house. You can also do add-on books at a lower cost than what you would get at like Barnes & Noble or Amazon or whatever. They're beautiful. Like they're all hardcover and just really, really nice with like exclusive sleeves. So I will link Book of the Month down below. And I want to say if you sign up using my link, it's a referral link. So I get like a book credit, but I think you get the first month for only $5. It might be $10, but it's a discount either way. Another Book of the Month pick that I got was Anna Maria and the Fox. It's like a historical romance. I also want to read Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. Emily Henry's Happy Place, that's like at the top of my list, but I'm probably going to read like 5 books before I read that one because I know I'm going to love it and I want to give it the best shot. And Elle Kennedy's The Deal. That's everything that I want to read in the month of June. Let's talk about all the things though. Please follow me over on the Kate Chapters Instagram if you like books. If you sat through to this moment, you obviously like books because that was a lot of yip yapping over here. On there, I have my book reviews that I've done. I also have like templates. So if you're also into Bookstagram and you want to post things that you're reading, I have a lot of graphics on there under the tab that says templates. I also have like my 5-star reads as their own category. That way, if you're at the library or at the bookstore, you can go right to that to figure out what to grab. That is it. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up before you leave. Make sure you subscribe to stick around for the crazy. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.